Good afternoon. Hello, everyone. My name is Janice Presley, and I'm the Vice President of the High Desert Pearls Interest Group, which is a part of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. We're really excited to be here today on session number 5 of what we are calling So You Want to Run for Office. We're very excited about our panel of speakers today, as well as our guests. Just a little bit of information about Alpha Kappa Alpha. We were founded on the campus of Howard University on January 15th, 1908, and the High Desert Pearls Interest Group is located in the high desert of California, supporting the cities of Adelanto, Apple Valley, Barstow, Hesperia, and well as Victorville and the surrounding areas. And we're really excited to have all of our guests here today. We're doing this in partnership with a couple of other organizations. And so I'm going to pass this on to Phyllis Morris, and she can talk about her organization that's partnering with us on this event. Phyllis.
Thank you, Janice. Good afternoon. My name is Phyllis Morris Green, and I chair Reimagining Our Communities, also known as ROC. So ROC is an organization that arose as a result of George Floyd's murder. We wanted to take the focus from the march into other areas such as legislation, advocacy, the vote, and also running for office. This year is critical in that there are several seats, local seats coming up for election. And one of our goals is to increase civic involvement, engagement in our communities. And so we want to encourage you to consider running for an elected office. My father would always say, if you aren't willing to become involved, don't complain, right? And then also with ROC, we are an organization where we set the table in terms of issues affecting our community, and we invite organizations and individuals to that table. And so if at some point you want to become involved with ROC, you can find us online under Reimagining Our Communities, and we're also under Millionaire Mind Kids, which is the entity that we operate under. So thank you for your participation this afternoon. And I am going to pass it on to Sir.
Good afternoon, Leva. We thank you for joining us today in our fifth rendition of So You Want to Run for Office. Today I'm representing Family Assistance Program, which was started back in 1985 as a domestic violence shelter. And through the years, the agency has grown into so much more. The agency has grown, has a much larger shelter facility now. They have transitional housing programs, a separate outreach office and satellite office, not only in the high desert, but in San Bernardino County. We have embarked on several new programs. We have two runaway homeless youth shelters, a homeless youth street outreach team, youth drop-in center, next step reentry program, community centers, and anti-human trafficking programs, and other programs and services to support the needs of our Victor Valley and all San Bernardino County. And we're proud to be part of this initiative and training to help those who might want to run for office. We're working on a website now that's going to offer a lot of information as far as dates that you can start pulling papers if you'd like to run. It's going to have who are your incumbents. It's going to have your districts that you're in, no matter if you're running for a school board, if you're going to be running for a city council office, the water board. We'll have all that information, local information for those in the high desert who are interested in running for office. So I'm looking forward to getting that website out as soon as possible. And once again, we're glad to be here. And I think I'm passing it over to Roger.
Think so. Thank you, sir.
All right.
Hey, everyone. I'm Roger Ouellette. I represent Campaign in a Box, along with my partners here, Pete D'Alessandro and Nicole DiMaria. Some of you have heard our intro before, so I'll try to keep it brief and pass it to Pete and Nicole before we get to our our key speakers here. But Campaign in a Box started between the three of us as an idea. We between the three of us, we have quite a number of decades of electoral experience behind us at all levels of the electoral sphere, from local city council and school board all the way up to the presidential level. And we've worked together on many campaigns. And around 2020, we started having conversations that, we having the institutional knowledge on how to best operate a campaign, from anything from political engagement on to how to best organize walking in a parade, and everything in between. That sort of institutional knowledge is largely held behind a class of consultants who are frankly won't answer the phone for less than $5,000 to $10,000 a month. And we know that because we've experienced it as electoral workers ourselves, working on campaigns with high price consultants. So we had the idea to sort of flip things on their head a little bit, and work within the budgets of first time and grassroots candidates who might not know how to get things started, how to get off the ground, who are might be running on the right ideas that work for their community, but just don't know necessarily where to turn to get everything set up, whether it's in the field or in communications or political engagement, that type of thing. And we decided to start our little firm, and everything looked good on paper. And and then we started in our sphere. And we've had you can go to our website and take a look, but we've had a good amount of success, even within the high desert area here, all the way to Vermont and the East Coast. So that's sort of generally a little bit about us. I represent more of the communications wings of things for Campaign in a Box, and Pete and Nicole uh, uh, kind of run things with our field and our sort of the blending of field and technology. So I'll pass it over to them very quickly to introduce themselves, because that's going to be the focus of our main agenda today.
Let me get on my video here, making sure everything's set. Thanks, Raj. I'll be brief because you're going to be hearing from me later. I've spent my career in organizing, and a great bulk of it in whether it be petition drives, citizens initiatives, uh, campaigns, or in many cases, social justice issues, organizing around not necessarily a candidate, but issues that are pertaining to communities, or in some cases, the country. You'll be hearing from me later on the agenda, so I'll be very brief and just double down on what Roger said. We were very frustrated that we had come to this point in our republic in which basically good people were not getting the best advice they could get to run for office. Doesn't mean everyone's going to win when they get good advice, or they're getting a good level playing field in that way, but they're never going to be able to reach their highest potential if only one side of, and usually that's the moneyed side, is getting the experienced people working for them. So we just came up with this idea. Let's not have a price point. Let's find the people that are standing for the things we believe in and offer our services to them. And that's how we do it, without a price point. We tell the folks that we talk to, go back, talk to your team. If you think there's a fit, come back to us next week. You tell us what your campaign budget can be, because everyone's is different. And then we do the best we can the advice we can give those folks from that point on. And like Rod said, we're proud of all of our clients that we have worked with. They run for the right reasons. We're very proud of some of the victories we've had because they were in races that, at many of them, from you can tell by the type of people that we're drawn to, were in races that people weren't expecting them to win when we started with them. So that's where we come from. We understand that piece of it. I'm going to kick it over to Nicole so that we can get the introduction part done, because I think there's a lot of really great stuff and a couple of great speakers I want to listen to on the program.
Hi, everybody. I am Nicole. I'm the third member of the Campaign in a Box leadership team. I will also keep my piece brief because you'll be hearing a lot from me later about campaign technology and how to do field outreach virtually. So I am a Gen Z member, and I always say, like, my generation is the first one where they just told us to our faces growing up, yeah, it's not going to be good for you, and there's not anything you can do about it. And that's really what spurred me to get politically involved, because we had people running when I was in high school who started to say, hey, maybe this isn't the best course of the world, and maybe we should start actually trying to make it better for the next few generations instead of just leaving them this crumbling pile of ash to try to work their way out of. And I believe that this is a field of work where you can't do it if you're not passionate about it. And I have been so lucky with Pete and Roger to keep that passion going and work with the folks that we work with, and feel like we're really making a difference from the local to the federal level. So thank you all for having us today, and I will kick it back to our hosts.
Awesome. Thanks, Nicole. So yeah, we'll get into our main agenda, and just helpful sort of housekeeping things for Paul and Josiah. Is kind of how we like to frame this with the schedule. Is, yep, we have our, we want to, when we have our featured speakers, we have 10 to 15 minutes blocked out just to sort of hear all of your experiences in the electoral sphere, lessons you've learned from running for office, Paul and Josiah, with you working on a campaign, kind of your experiences, best practices, good lessons to learn, hard lessons you've learned, kind of really just kind of broad, broad scope. Anything you'd like to tell us about experiences either working electorally or running yourself electorally, what you found has worked well for you, anything like that. And then when we the topic for today is heavily involved in field engagement. So we're going to be talking pretty extensively about the mechanics of phone banking, canvassing, community outreach, some newer campaign tech that has been coming down the line in over the last couple cycles, and even into some event organizing, relational organizing, that type of thing. That element of our agenda is more of a free form conversation, as Sir can tell you from last week when he was, or last time we ran the program where he was the guest speaker. Also, Sir, since you're on, if as we continue our conversation, if you do have if you want to jump into our format, would be happy to do that. But for now, I will pass it over to Paul, so that you can introduce yourself and give us some background about running for office and anything you'd like to share about your experiences.
Okay, well, good evening, everybody. I appreciate the invitation. Yeah, my name is Paul Marsh. I've been a longtime resident of the High Desert. Got here in 1962. As for the purpose of this meeting, I've held and hold a few appointed positions I work with the First District Board of Supervisors, Colonel Paul Cook's office right now as a community liaison. I sit on the Victorville Planning Commission, and I work extensively with the SBGOP Central Committee. So those are, just some of the things that I do now. Now, I am a candidate for state assembly. Um, I jumped into the political arena as far as as a candidate back in, I believe it was 2016, 2018, when I ran for city council for the first time. And, just judging from what everybody has spoken about, the people that have spoken so far today, I learned a lot in that. I learned a lot what not to do or what not to count on during that city council bid. Um, I did not have a budget. I did not have the support, and I relied on the wrong things, which by growing, one of the biggest things that I keep falling back to is the fact that I took a lot of things for granted. The fact that I lived here since 1962 and I knew, a lot of people, I just took for granted that I would automatically get the vote. So with a very limited budget, really slim to no budget, I just, I relied on that fact and I didn't put a whole lot of effort. I spoke to people when I had the opportunity, but I didn't really seek people out because I just thought that everybody knew me and, it's going to be what it's going to be. And I didn't realize that, growing up in Victorville, the high desert, Victorville was about 30,000 people, whereas today it's about 135,000 people just in the city of Victorville. So, I missed that boat. As far as not having a budget, I couldn't utilize professional, agencies like advertising agencies or marketing agencies, because I talked to one marketing group. They wanted to help me during the city council bid, but they were $12,000 a month. And when you have a zero budget, $12,000 a month, I kind of just chuckled and just tell them, there's no need for me to sit here and waste their time. I'm not the person they're looking for, and I left with that. But understanding that there is outside help that you do need. You can't do it all by yourself. So you do need a team of people to work with you. Now, fast forwarding, the state assembly, through the redistricting of San Bernardino County, they created a new district, which is District 39. And in the high desert, which comprises, parts of the high desert and parts of LA County. So they combined us together. I really had no intention of running for that race last cycle. But what happened was the Republican that we had on the ballot at that time, he passed away right before the primary took place. And so everybody was scurrying around, looking for a replacement. And they asked me to, put my hat in, and I told them okay and stuff. Which I had one day to get all my paperwork turned in, and get everything to where I can get on the ballot and stuff. Which we were successful at that. Everybody helped me get on the ballot, but after I got on the ballot, everybody disappeared. It was like you turn the light on and cockroaches they scurry off to whatever hiding places they have and stuff. So I learned a lesson there is that as far as counting on the right people, they're not always in your corner. Everybody comes in with a agenda. The agenda for my first assembly bid was they just wanted a Republican on the ballot. They did not expect me to win, and so they were not going to really support me in my attempt to win. So the support, and it's sad to say, we come into candidates, for the most part, I'm going to say they go into politics and they run for different offices for reasons. They want there's something that they feel that they could do to better, the community that they live in. Candidates to this arena. I don't think anybody just gets up one day and says, well, me, I guess, because I kind of filled that spot for the last, at the last second. But really kind of say, okay, well, I'm gonna, I want to be a candidate. I'm gonna do this or that. There's usually a driving reason. Okay, so as I was progressing through my first, the last cycle, the drive, I started realizing, I started rebirthing my the drive that I had, as I grew up, and vested in, wanted to make it a better place. But again, you need help. Okay, so I did not have help from the establishment. I had $0 again, which I kind of mustered some private money together, and my money, and uh, I had some personal donors, some individual donors, and that was enough to kind of put my name on the line, or on the dotted line, but it wasn't really enough to, say that you're running a viable, strong candidate, election and stuff. So there's a lot of things that I did not know about. There were things that I was brought aware of, like as far as certain tools that a candidate should have access to. But and I don't know if this is the same across the board or not, but from my standpoint, in order to have access to certain tools from the upper echelon, um, I had to be able to generate so much money in campaign and donations, which a person that's never done any fundraising, never done any. I'm not good at asking people for money. But I mean, for a person that's never done that, to say, okay, the only way that you can have access to this is you need to be able to bring in, $100,000. Okay. Well, again, that's just, that just kind of just, it puts a damper on on the person's uh, mental, puts a damper on them mentally. And so I started looking for other ways. Okay. And towards the end, that's when I started talking to people, telling them my plight and everything. And, I started getting people to help me. And I started realizing, okay, well, there's a workaround to all this. The key is to get people to help you, like-minded people. And they're out there that would volunteer for you, that will help and stuff. So I started getting all that going, but it was too late. It was really too late for that cycle, which was back in 2022. So the sum of the 2022 cycle is they thought I had no chance of winning. We were the underdogs as far as what's on paper. And that's another lesson that I learned. As candidates, we should not rely on what is on paper. What's on paper does not measure what's in people's hearts, what's in people's minds. So a lot of times we look at, what's on paper, percentages, things of that nature, and we draw reference from that. We're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot if we as candidates, if we start relying on that, rely on that as gospel truth, because it's nowhere near the truth. What they found out, that with a little bit of work and a little bit of help, well, a lot of work and a little bit of help that I had in 2022, we came in a lot better than what they expected. We came in a lot better than what should have been on what was reflected on paper. Okay, so now this time around, it was my choice to run for 2024, and that's simply because of my same values, the things that I would like to see within my community, within the state that I reside in, California. But it was a decision that I made. So talking with my family, they reaffirmed my position. They reaffirmed it. So then I started talking in preparation. I talked to people that supported me the last cycle, and I talked to other people that I didn't have a chance to really kind of confer with during the 2022 cycle. And I let them know what I want to do. And, kind of we looked at the pros and cons, and that's where our decision was made from. But this time around, which is really kind of the third time for me as far as running for an elected position, you know, I've learned a lot to where now I've been able to put together some prerequisites and have some things in place, in preparation for this bid. And things are going a lot better. Things are. I don't feel like I'm kind of just floundering haphazardly. There's order to what we have. I mean, what we have in place. There's order to it, and there's a general upward progression to what we have going on now. In addition to that, because see the thing, a lot of candidates in their first go round, they automatically assume, well, whatever party you belong to, whatever the establishment is, they're going to automatically help you. Because why shouldn't they? You're running for an office that is, you're running for an office that's, affiliated with whatever party or whatnot. So they should help. They should help you, but that's not necessarily always the truth. You may be well known in your community, but if you're not, if they deem you as an unknown or brand new person, or there's certain support that they might pull from you. There's certain support that they may not give you, and we just have to understand that. Okay, well, this time around, being like I said, the third time, I have, and the fact that we did so well the first time, and did even though we were unsuccessful, we did so much better than what everybody assumed that we would do or expected us to do. Now, they're pulling in different support. It's not the support, I mean, we're considered a small race when they're looking at other races and everything like that. So it's not the type of support that we would like to have, but it's still some support. What I rely on now, and what we've been able to garner now, is the fact that, through talking with people, I found out that people is the biggest support that we can garner. It's the people, because ultimately, at the end of the day, it's what the people say that's going to matter whether or not you're successful or not. And so that's kind of a little bit about I've been able to, and I guess as we go along, we'll talk about the different programs and stuff like that, or the different areas that we were able, that we're working within, or able to, manifest within our candidacy. But for me, it's taken that kind of, to me, kind of like a roller coaster ride to learn, what it is that I know now, or to have experienced what I'm experiencing now. Because a lot of times, like I said, when we first start, we know we're doing a good thing. We're stepping outside the box. We're committing ourselves to the better good. So why wouldn't everybody just jump on the bandwagon and push us across the finish line? Well, there's a lot of things that take place, in the interim for that to happen. And so it's been a, you know, learning experience. I've had my ups and downs to where there's times that you go off in the corner and just shake your head and say, why do this? There's times that you feel exuberated, that you're glad, and I mean, everything's falling into place. So, there's a lot of emotions that go along with this and stuff. But overall, it's been a good experience. I have learned a lot, and, I'm learning more. So, I mean, with that, I'll kind of kick it back to you, Roger.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, you bring up you bring up a really good point. It's something that, over the course of these, five sessions we haven't hit yet, which is you know, whether it's the Republican Party or the Democratic Party. I think something that a lot of new candidates don't necessarily understand is even if you are the nominee, whether it's the state party or the county party or even more local organizations, um, they have so much to focus on and a limited amount of resources that they have to make judgment calls on where they feel that the resources and the volunteers and things like that need to go. And there's a whole lot of we could do a whole nother session on the sort of like interpolitics of the state and county parties and things like that. And you bring up a good point which is um you know at the end of the day, it is up to you and your campaign to maximize and do the best you can with your campaign. We've seen it time and time again. um that the sort of the institutional help that you think is going to or the amount of it that you think you're going to get is never quite what it's going to be. And this is why it's a good segue into what we're talking about today with the field, which is like you have to be your own best champion. The organized Republican Party, the organized Democratic Party is not going to do it for you. There are certain levels of help that are going to come along the way, but you need to be your own best champion. And I think you bring up a really good point in talking about that we haven't quite necessarily covered yet. And just to keep our agenda flowing, I'll pass it over to Josiah to introduce yourself and give us a little bit about your background in the electoral sphere and anything else you want to talk about campaign related, and then we'll jump into our main agenda.
All right. So, hi everybody. My name's Josiah. I'm kind of new to politics. I just started working for Derek officially in March. But I have experience volunteering on a lot of exciting campaigns. My uncle was the top organizer in Southern California for Obama in 2008, which that was the catalyst for politics for me, and what really gave me a good experience. And I was a freshman in high school, and that experience kind of ignited my interest throughout my whole 20s. And then I was involved with Bernie in 2016 and 2020. Which was, they were exciting campaigns. There were two times where we saw an excitement in politics around the country that we're just not used to seeing. It's definitely not there right now. Working in politics, I mean, I know and talking to a lot of voters, people just aren't as excited as those type of campaigns. But I really got a lot of my political background in outreach and community work, because I believe, like Bernie said in 2016 and 2020, that change doesn't come from the top down. It comes from the bottom up, And so I love the high desert. I have been here for most of my life. I call myself a desert rat. I graduated from Victor Valley High School. All my best friends are from the high desert. So I thought, why not start at my home? And just kind of like build on the help from the establishment. Yeah, we're a Democratic campaign in a rural area. Our district is historically red, so we are on a lot of the time overlooked by the establishment. We're finally on their radar. We just got an endorsement from Ro Khanna, who is beloved by the establishment. But it took a campaign and a half to get there. One thing that we did is we went and found the candidates around us that the campaign does support us, and being in a congressional district, it's so huge that we found the overlapping ones. And we went and we talked and we coordinated, and we made sure that we'll have like an agreement where we do a lot of organizing work, volunteering work for us, and they'll help with some of just funding with wherever they can, I think that's a way to kind of connect and coordinate there. Like Paul was saying, help, help is essential when you're running a political campaign. We have to not be afraid to ask for help. Even if they say no, sometimes you're reluctant to ask for help because we're always so like, oh, pull ourselves up by the bootstraps. But I'm very against that. I think that help is a way that we start making progress forward. And then just to build on what Paul's saying, at the end he realized how important the people are, and that's where your real support is going to come along. And when I came onto the campaign, I told Derek, I said, hey, I need to talk to as many voters as I can, because that's where I'm really going to sharpen my language and understand what the people want, and you're not going to have a campaign if you're not running on what the people want, right? Especially in your region. Every region is so particular that it's important. I make Derek go out and knock doors and talk to voters at least twice a week. As a candidate, obviously, a lot of his time is spent fundraising. But just to keep him sharp and on his toes, I tell him he needs to be in the trenches, at least 2 or 3 times a week. And as we get closer to the election, that's one thing that we're going to be doing too. He's going to be hitting doors at 3 or 4 times a week. That's just kind of like the transitional process when you get away from the fundraising to okay, we're closer to the election. We need to talk to as many voters as possible. And then one thing that I did is I acknowledge that politics is a very polarizing topic right now and across the country. A lot of people, and we living in a bipartisan state, we tend to argue with each other instead of connecting over what the things that we have in common. We seem to focus on the things that we don't. And so one thing that I've been making sure of just training our volunteers up to par is not ever sitting there and having a debate with someone. You're not gonna connect with someone by disagreeing. It's constant leveling. And that's one thing that I had to learn going canvassing myself, because sometimes at first I would hear things and I would come off way more combative than I meant to, and I realized it's a product. I'm only a product of my environment, and we're all taught that politics is a debate, and so we've been seeing a lot of success with just leveling with your constituents, as opposed to trying to sit there and have a debate with them at their front door. I'd love to talk to anybody. I'm not going to limit myself to a Democrat that has a lot of values aligned with me. I actually want to get out there and have a conversation with people who aren't aligned with me, so I can try to understand them more. And to me, it's a lot more valuable to go out and talk to a Republican and get them to commit to vote. I feel a lot more successful and proud of myself when I'm able to have that two-way conversation, and just truly understand someone. So yeah, I mean, basically that's what I've been learning on how we're kind of going to take back politics is one thing that I did before this was working with the youth. I would always tell them to think smaller, which sounds like a crazy thing to say in 2024 when, you know, we do have overnight celebrities and people go viral and they go from not being known to being one of the most viewed people in the world. And so we kind of all have like that expectation that could happen for us. Um, and in politics, what that translates to is a lot of the time people want to change the world overnight. You know, you get those excited people who are excited about change and they're driven. And what I try to tell them is to just think smaller, think about the person in front of you, and not the whole world today. You know, we're gonna change the world by having real conversations on a daily basis, and it's going to be a slow and a steady type of change, and not a viral overnight type of one. And you would think that that's something that someone who's you know, full of youth and invigorated with passion isn't going to want to hear, but it resonates with them because they've never been told that before. And I'm finding it a lot easier to get youth back into the fold because, you know, since 2020, we kind of seen youth disengage with politics on a national level. And yeah, I think that's the obstacle for a lot of organizations that, you know, we talked to, you know, Working Families, the Working Families Party, the Democrats, or the Progressive Democrats of America. Alan Minsky and I were just having a conversation on how that's the big question is how do we get youth excited about politics again? And it's just leveling with them. And I feel like that approach doesn't only work with youth, but it works with everybody, you know, just understanding that it's not the easiest time well, it is a hard time to be an American right now. And how are we going to come together to fix these issues instead of continuing to argue about the things that we don't get along about, you know? And so I'm going to end it there. I would love to jump into the conversations about phone banking, canvassing, and texting, and all the things that we're trying to do and implement, because knowledge is power, you know. So I would hate to be a gatekeeper of knowledge and not want to let you guys know what is successful for us at this point in time, you know. So yes, I'm going to pass it back to Roger.
Awesome. Thank you, Josiah. I think you bring up a good overall point of, you know, the sort of the philosophy of the field. An important thing to keep in mind is to meet people where they're at and to listen as a, you know, and to be where people are at. And I think that's you know, that's an important, you know, first step, and also a good segue into the agenda for today, um you know, talking about the tools that we use in the field to, you know, talk to our voter base to reach as many people as possible, and to have those type of honest conversations in order to try to, you know, persuade them to your campaign. So, you know, I as we've known, as we've gone through these, I facilitate and kind of moderate a lot of the conversation. But today I'll still do that, but I'm gonna kind of take more of a backseat and let you know, those that are actively in the field kind of help drive the conversation. I myself started in the field, and then Pete gave me my first organizing job, and then I betrayed field politics and went into communications, and have been there ever since. Um, so we will, but I think generally, if I can add one sort of um, you know, overarching point would be, you know, so today we're going to be talking about phone banking, canvassing, texting, and events and relational organizing. Um, and I think just with the basics, an important thing to know is, you know, in the field, you know, we we kind of categorize the not necessarily the effectiveness, but just like there's a certain degree of how much you're going to be able to persuade someone in a moment. And so, whereas where all of these things are really effective tools for organizing, they don't necessarily exist in a silo. They all blend together in order to get people on your side. And as we sort of talk about the mechanics of field organizing, you're going to hear a lot about um, hitting voters, a number of times in communications. Um, and when we talk about that, you know, when the best way to sort of have a conversation and persuade a voter to your side is going to be that face-to-face conversation in a canvas, especially if it can be the candidate themselves. And then, phone banking follows that. That's just sort of natural. That's still a voice-to-voice conversation. And then texting, while a great organizing tool and recruitment tool, for persuasion, it's fairly impersonal. And so there are degrees on which we have these there are degrees in which these tools can be helpful in persuading voters to your side, but they all blend into each other. So we can that is just kind of the basic intro and overview that I wanted to kick things off with. But I think the first thing on the agenda that we have uh, is phone banking and just talking about how to effectively set up a phone bank operation, strategies, best practices, and some of the tools and resources that are out there. So let me just uh, Josiah, because you're actively in the field right now, let me kind of kick things off with you real quick, and just ask, can you tell us what a typical phone bank for Derek's campaign looks like, and some of the tools that you're working on, or some of the softwares and the programs that you're working with?
So right now we're working with PDI. We are getting an auto dialer this week. So on the campaign, we've the past couple weeks we've been training people through infrastructures that are already up. Like one right now that is important to us is the Jamal Bowman phone banking opportunities that are going on through Working Families Party and several other organizations. And so that's a good way to provide training for your volunteers, because they're already going to have infrastructure set up, and be able to train your volunteers in a way that if it's a big campaign like that, that they're not going to probably have the opportunity to on a smaller one. But so what we like to do specifically is connect our like our phone banking events. We hold them every Wednesday. Um, we like to attach a little fun social afterwards. So when people come over, they know that they're going to be on the dialer for a couple hours at most. But then afterwards, we're gonna have dinner, we're gonna have refreshments, and we're gonna just hang out and have community time. And that seems to have been successful for us. We've probably seen anywhere from like 70 to 80 new faces this cycle by implementing that. And every week we're seeing like 12 to 15 people at our canvassing, which is good numbers right now in the political spectrum. Um, yeah, so I would say resources, obviously having an auto dialer, but then that's a financial thing as well. If you don't have the money to be able to afford it, I think it's like 33 cents a phone call. And I mean, we're planning on making a lot of phone calls, so it adds up, obviously.
That makes sense.
Uh,
You make you make a good point, and I'm going to kick it over to Pete and Nicole after this. But I wanted to, when I first got hired as an organizer, the first Pete has a list of organizing principles, and one of the first rules that we ever learned was always bring the donuts, which was basically, if you want, uh, yes, it's great to recruit volunteers and to get people to, hit the numbers that you need to be hitting, but you also need to provide a good experience for those volunteers and be grateful for that and make them want to come back. That's the fulfillment of a solid volunteer shift. And that's something important to remember. Like, it's not just about that, hour, 2 hour block. It's about, how can we maximize the people that are, going on a limb, taking time away from work and family to like help the campaign. How can we, make sure that they have a good time and keep coming back? So I'll pass it over to Pete if he wants to go a little bit further on that. Oh, you're muted, Pete.
I want to double down on that. Really, what you're building is a camaraderie that is so important. And really, the best campaigns all have it. Now, often it's around, uh, in the best situations, it's around just a belief or a coming together around a candidate or a cause, and that's what starts it. But what
Obama, I'm sorry, Obama's one word was hope, and they took
yeah,
that word and built an electric campaign off.
The story I always tell is in 2020, 2019, Bernie had the heart attack during the campaign, and there was a moment when you're talking at these high levels of, well, if we get out, how are you going to get out? What does it mean to a movement? All this stuff. And I remember I happened to, from where I lived, I would walk by our our regional field office on the way to my office in the headquarters, and the 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 Tuesday or Wednesday after the event, uh, I walked by and the place was packed. Now the campaign had shut down; it had to, obviously. And what had happened was that camaraderie you talked about was built around the ideas around the campaign. Volunteers just showed up and just said, even though we weren't given any orders, it looks like we have to carry this thing for a while. We get it. And it was a big moment in a very specific situation that proves what you're saying is correct. When you can build that kind of camaraderie, and how you do it around a common cause. I'm going to talk real quickly about some 30,000 feet stuff because I think it helps explain both what I was talking about and then what Nicole's going to talk about. When I talk about the field, to me, field is the art of finding your voters and then speaking to them. The story I always tell, I like to tell a story about, I don't know if any folks on this call would know him, but there was this bank robber down in Texas named Willie Sutton, and he was pretty famous. He robbed a lot of banks and didn't get caught for a long time, and he finally got caught. And as they were walking him to whatever, the press was there because he was that big of a deal, and they asked him, "Why do you rob banks?" And he said, "Well, that's where the money is." And I always like to bring that to my field concept is, why are we knocking on this door? Why are we in this particular community knocking on doors? Why are we targeting this group of people? It's because where the votes are. You got to go where the votes are. Because the one thing that every campaign, whether you're working for Mike Bloomberg or JB Pritzker, or you're working for the guy who cares about his community, who's running for office for the first time, who doesn't have a dime in his campaign coffers. The one thing you all have in common is time. That's the one thing that every campaign is equal in. Some are going to be better in other things. They're going to have more, less, whatever. Time is equal. And so what we talk about in the field is being able to target our actions to make the time as efficient as it can be. And so what we start with is, what is your voter universe? Now that's easy. You can get that from the Secretary of State. Doesn't really cost you anything. That's basically who's registered to vote, who's eligible to vote in my district. But that's too broad unless you're J.B. Pritzker or Mike Bloomberg. And so what you then want to do is you come up with your win number. What's the number it's going to take for me to win this election, whether it's a primary, whether it's a runoff, whether it's a general? What's the magic number that if I get to that number, they can't beat me? And there's a little, a little experience, a little science in that, but that goes back to looking at like races in the same type of years that you're running in. And then it gets down to the next number after you have that win number is, what's the universe that gets me there? So again, remembering that we all don't have, most of us don't have that money I talked about. All of us have to be efficient with our time. The next thing we want to do is say, who do I need to be talking to? I only have X amount of days. The election is this date. So yes, if I had the resources, I'd be on TV. I'd be sending mail to everybody. I'd be trying to flip people. I get that. But especially in the state rep, congressional, to some extent, congressional is actually at that next level now, but state rep, city council races, who are the people most likely to vote? That's who you definitely have to talk to. And you can do that. You can get that number just by looking at doing the research of the old voter things. I always like to take the last 3 elections and then give me anyone who's voted in at least 2 of 3 of them. And that becomes my universe. Then from there, how do I reach out to those people? In the smaller races, I have said this for 30 years now. If Joe Biden or Donald Trump or Mitt Romney or Barack Obama could knock on 75 million doors, Roger kind of alluded to this in a different way, they would do that. That's the best way to talk to people. The reason that doesn't happen is obviously you can't knock on 75 million doors. The win number there. However, in a state rep race, we've elected candidates who literally knocked on the win number doors because you can do it. You can budget your time. And in some of these races where it takes 2,600 votes, 3,700 votes, depending on what you're running for, you can knock on enough doors as a candidate. Now, here's the great thing. You know that if you can build it out, like Josiah talked about, to get a canvas team together, you can definitely touch the people at the doors with a full team on some of these numbers. And so that's really the big thing. We have this tendency, because I think it's what we hope and wish it could be, and it should be this, is, yep, we're not going to leave any stone unturned. We're going to knock on every door. We're going to talk to as many people as we can. The talking to as many people as we can, never lose that. That's exactly right. But it has to be efficient. And, I can use extremes, but you all know what I'm talking about. You're going to be able to look at certain lists, and it's going to be like, I'm much better being over here where there's the demographics show me that's, let's say you're running as a Democrat in a general. Look, this precinct, 72% of the people are Democrat. Oh, geez, and only 33% of them vote. That's the precinct I want to be in. Because not only am I going to be talking to the people I need to get to the polls, everyone I'm not talking to is probably going to vote for me if I can get them there. I'm not going to go to the precinct at first. That's not going to be targeted. That votes 82% Republican, because you're better off. I call it the Stacey Abrams model because she brilliantly did this in Georgia. Is you have a better chance of getting people in a like-minded area, regardless of how you're defining that, who normally don't vote, to vote for you, because it's a one-step process. Oh, I agree with everything you say. I just don't usually vote. Boom. Here, I need you to vote. Then you are to both go into a territory where folks don't necessarily think the same way. Now you have to flip them. You have to have that conversation. And then even after you flip them, you have to figure out a way to get them to the polls. So the big thing is get your universe, figure out your win number, and then figure out who are the people you need to talk to get to that win number. Now, I will tell you that's different in every place. There are districts, regardless of your partisanship, that literally you can say, if I'm running as a Republican, if I talk to all the Republicans in, I live in Iowa. If the Republican candidate only talks to Republicans in Iowa District 27, that's all they have to do. There's enough Republicans to win. There's not enough independents and Democrats combined to win a district like that. And there's districts like Senate District 18 in Des Moines, Iowa, where there's not enough Republicans. So all you need to do is talk to the Democrats. Now, if you're on the other side of that, that's where it gets interesting. All right. Well, I'm running in a district that's 61% Republican. I happen to be a Democrat. I still have to get the 50 plus one. All right. Well, who do I start with? Well, I'm going to start with my Democrats. I'm going to start with my Democrats who don't necessarily vote. I'm going to talk to independents. And now you have to build out to where you get to your 50 plus one. And this is where what Josiah was saying comes into play is, yeah, sometimes you do have to go into those precincts that there will be a little bit of persuasion going on because you can't get the 50 plus one in some areas without it. But each place is different. That's what to get your arms around is every place is different. But the one thing that stays the same is you need the efficiency of the time you're using to get to people, and you want to build your lists that you're knocking, that you're calling, that you're texting. It isn't necessarily field, but that you're mailing to, all that kind of stuff. You want to build that list so it's the most efficient way to get to your win number. And then you work from there to build it or to build it out. So I think that is really the biggest thing that sometimes gets lost. And it's the first piece you have to do, and it takes some time to get it done. And then I'll kick it to Nicole to talk about the stuff she does, because you can see where you can now implement these programs into that. Is the number one thing is know your universe, know what it takes to win, and then you can draw your plan on how many hours of work, how many volunteers I need, how many times do I need to touch each person to get them there. And then the last thing, again, I'm repeating myself, but I think it's so important to remember, is every place is different in that way. So someone in a district next to you might come to you and say, well, we're only targeting this, this, and this. We're not doing that. That's fine. That's what they need to do in their district. In your district, wherever you're running, you want to target your 50 plus one win number to the most efficient way and the people most likely to get you there. That always starts with taking a look at who your most frequent voters are. You always want to start with talking to them. If they voted before an election like yours and they have a history of doing it, they're going to vote again. So those are the folks you want to talk to at first. And then from there, you keep expanding. So I'm going to leave that piece there. Again, it's 30,000 feet, but I think it fits into the individual stuff. And it might make some of the stuff Nicole's talking about a little clearer.
Yeah. Thanks, Pete. No, that's a good place to start before we actually get into sort of the the mechanics of phone banking, texting, and knocking on the doors. I think it's should have led there, but Pete brings up a good point. Is like you want to make sure that you have your universe of voters that are going to consistently come out and vote at the election. That doesn't necessarily preclude the idea of bringing new folks into the electorate and working on those type of things, trying to re-inspire folks who maybe have dropped off, that type of thing. That could be a part of a campaign. But when we're talking about hard numbers, win numbers, we need to be able to take a look at the voting universe out there, see who's consistently coming out to every election, and doing our best to get our argument in front of them as many times as possible between when you start your campaign and election day, and then the tools that we use, phone banking, texting, canvassing, help us accomplish that. So let me let me kick it over to Nicole right now, because I want to give her the dais to kind of introduce a texting, which is, campaign texting, which is a campaign tool that's, really, from our experience, skyrocketed to prominence in the around the 2016 election, when it was first started to be implemented at the presidential level, and also on, kind of across the country, at every level, as a way to contact voters, use it as a volunteer recruitment tool, use it as a persuasion tool, in a way that is very, very, and then to this day remains a very, very cost effective way of communicating with voters. So, Nicole, I will give you the floor to talk all things campaign texting.
Sounds good. I will share a brief presentation. If any of you were here for the fundraising seminar that we did, some of these slides might look a little bit familiar, because a lot of the rules and regulations surrounding field texting are identical to the ones surrounding fundraising. So give me 1 second. Okay. I'm going to see if I can make this work. Hang on. Okay. No, I can't see it. I'm sorry. Give me 1 moment. Zoom is giving me a hard time. I think we'll just have to share it like in line with the screen. Okay. We're just gonna have to do it like this because it's not letting me make it full screen. So the first thing is, what is peer-to-peer or person-to-person texting? So this just defines texting that requires a human person to manually click or press a button somewhere in order to send each individual text. So broadcast texting, where you push a button once and then it gets blasted out to everybody, that can only be done for people who have opted in. So somebody who signed up on your website or signed up at an in-person event. You can only send broadcast text to people who have said, yes, please send me text messages from this campaign. Otherwise, it has to be peer-to-peer, and this just keeps people from getting spammed. It keeps people from getting completely bogged down. It adds a level of difficulty to texting so that you're not just sending out, 20 campaign messages a day. So this does not require the person to be opted in, which is nice. And this allows campaigns to text people who may have no knowledge of your campaign or your organization, as long as you have a valid phone number for them. So I love to use this one as an example. This is these two roommates were sending each other text messages in the style of a peer-to-peer text message, to like remind each other to do the chores around the house. So I love this one, how it was worded. When Nava takes out the trash, I need you to replace the bag. Can I count on your support? That's just the perfect peer-to-peer texting structure. So there are a number of platforms. I have not even exhausted the list here, just giving you this sort of visual that there are so many options that will fit you and your organization or your campaign. There is no one size fits all for a texting software. My personal favorite has been Scale to Win. In the campaign sphere, I found that they have, a really good price point. They're very user friendly and very accessible and very quick to set up your account. But I have worked with a number of the ones on this list. I wouldn't have anything bad to say about any of them. Scale to Win is just the one that I tend to go towards because it's very commonly used for political campaigns. So it is important to remain compliant when you're sending these peer-to-peer text messages. Not doing so can risk getting filtered by different cell networks, being removed from the actual platform that you're using, and making your voters angry by sending them incorrect or excessive text messages. So there are a few things that you can do to make sure that your text messages are getting through to the right people. The first is registering with a service like Campaign Verify. This is strongly suggested by pretty much every peer-to-peer texting platform out there. Including your opt-out messaging is also crucial. And this is one of those things where if you don't have it, carriers like AT&T and T-Mobile will actually not let your text message go through to the recipient. So adding at the bottom, reply stop to quit, stop to opt out, reply stop to stop receiving text messages, any message like that at the bottom that gives people the information they need to no longer receive those texts is crucial. And a lot of these providers like Scale to Win and Hustle, they will actually not let you start sending the texts unless you have that line somewhere in your message. And these even need to go out to your volunteers, your supporters. Even if you've texted the person 20 times and they've been happy to get it every time, you need that message at the bottom. The next thing, this isn't necessarily a requirement, but it is very helpful and it helps prevent things like what happened with the Pelosi campaign getting sued. Be sure to sync the records of who has opted out across all your different databases and CRMs periodically. So I know some campaigns use one platform for fundraising texting and a different one for field texting. You'll want to make sure that if somebody opts out on one side, you are bringing that over to the other side so that folks are not still getting texts after they've opted out, because that can actually be a big problem. And the last thing, this is a common sense thing. Do not send excessive text messages. I would say anything more than once a week to somebody is excessive. Be sure to rotate through your different lists to allow people to kind of cool down in between those outreaches, just to make sure that they're not opting out just because they're frustrated with the number of texts they're getting. So how much does it cost? It is, I would say, the most cost-effective form of campaign outreach, just at base level. The Campaign Verify that I said is kind of recommended is $95. That's a one-time fee to get that verification put through to the cell carriers. Phone numbers and data from a vendor will vary in price. So if you're getting it like through Vote Builder or VAN, or you're getting it from the state party or the Secretary of State's office, that price varies quite drastically between those different sources. So you would have to check with them. And then a lot of these softwares have no upfront cost and they charge per text message. So Scale to Win will reduce your cost if you register with Campaign Verify, that one-time fee. And after you've done that, they charge you 2 cents per outbound SMS segment, which means just words, no pictures. And then 5 cents per outbound MMS message, which is a message of any length plus a photo or video. And then you get free inbound messages, meaning when people text you back, you're not charged for that. And they'll filter out landlines for you so that you're not sending text messages to a number that cannot receive it. So to text 10,000 people with one of those MMS image messages using Scale to Win, it would cost you only $500. So it is definitely the most cost-effective way to reach out to folks, in my opinion, and it is also the most time sensitive. So who should we be targeting? I take a very liberal approach to this. I think that you can target anybody with a cell phone. It works as a really nice in-between to emailing and calling, because people can kind of go back and read that message that you send at any time, and they can go back and refer to it like an email, but it's in a more convenient spot that people check more often because it's on their phone. So I text anybody with a cell phone number who is aged 18 to 80. Some people keep it just to young folks, like 18 to 35. My 82-year-old grandmother texts me emojis and gifts and all kinds of things. So I think that if she can do it, anybody can do it. And I actually do cut her out of my lists in this way, but just keeping it cost effective and putting the number somewhere, I'd say 18 to 80 is a good place to start. If you are on a budget or you're reaching out to older folks in other ways, you can bring that number down and just target like 18 to 40-year-olds. This also works really well for people who live in rural areas, apartment buildings, which usually you need a code or a key to unlock. or other hard to reach places. So if you're going out and you're canvassing and you're finding, oh shoot, there's this apartment building that 500 people live in and you need to be buzzed in to enter and I can't talk to any of them. A texting program, you could text those 500 people in probably 10 minutes. It is a very, very quick contact tool. So I think even asking the question, what message should I use? It's a very broad answer depending on what your goal is. I think it's very helpful to introduce your candidate or your issue, but it's not as helpful to go into detail. So I always keep my messages very short and sweet, no more than a couple paragraphs. And those paragraphs are maybe 2 or 3 sentences, and including a link to the website or to social media so that people can click in and learn more, and you're getting more traffic on your website that way. So you kind of want to grab people's attention with a key issue or a policy or a current event, or if you're having an event in their community, leading with that. And I would stay away from the more, this cycle especially, there's been a very large uptick in more deceptive messaging, and also fear-based messaging. So on the right here, you can see from the Save Democracy PAC, they were sending out messages saying, if you don't respond, you'll be marked as a non-voter. This means in their own database, but I think somebody could read that and be worried that somehow they're going to be unregistered from voting if they don't respond. Now they were compliant, they have stop to end at the bottom, but still, I don't think that this is really the way to build a community and build a movement. I think it's a great way to scare people, but that's not really what my goal is when I'm texting. Underneath, I've put one that's a little bit more my speed and kind of how I like to message. It's actually a little short in my opinion, but I think it's a perfect, it encapsulates like how you get that engagement when you're texting folks. So see, they're saying, we're encouraging you to fill out your ballot. Do you have a plan to vote yet? Including that question kind of pulls people into that conversation and creates a conversation rather than, hey, I'm just going to tell you all these things. Thank you. Goodbye. You want to have people responding and capturing some information from them, trying to answer a survey question or see if they support you or have questions for you. And just opening that conversation via text for people who might not be able to pick up the phone or who might not be home to be canvassed in person. It's a much more accessible way to have a conversation with somebody. So those are the slides that I have. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer. Roger, Pete, if you have anything, or Josiah, anything that I missed, now is the time.
Yeah, I'll just open it up for questions if there's any.
So why I was listening to all this, I started thinking of my Gen Z volunteers who hate phone banking. They're just they hate to answer the phone, even just calling them sometimes to get confirms. They'll be like, "Hey, can you just text me next time?" So I think this is a great way to get Gen Z involved in politics because it is a lot less anxiety inducing. I know when I ask, a younger volunteer to do phone banking, you can kind of see the anxiety start formulating. And
honestly, as a Gen Z organizer who hates calling my 200-person volunteer list sometimes because I'm just like, man, like this is going to take me 6 hours. I will just load them into a text bank and go for it. And that's been super helpful for me. And I do still sometimes make those calls, if it's a last minute thing. But, if you give people enough lead time, it can be a really great tool to like reactivate your volunteers.
Yes. Yeah. Great
Yeah,
presentation.
and to bring it back to something that that Paul said in his presentation, when you're a candidate, you're especially at the at the state level, state or municipal level, there are people who who come to you and say, unless you got 100 grand in the bank, don't even think about it. Like, unless you can go through your Rolodex right now and raise 100, 150, $200,000, you're not going to have the capabilities to mass communicate in the way that you need to win your race. And that, there's an element to that remains true to some degree, but what we've been seeing in trending, both from a campaign fundraising perspective and from a campaign organizing perspective, is that these as Nicole presented, this initial outreach, to it costing $500 to send a graphic and a message to 10,000 voters. That's in a very short amount of time. I mean, that's a great tool. Now, can you win a race just texting? No. You need to have a lot more direct community engagement in order to do that. But it is a great tool to make intros to people, to find volunteers on your side that can then join you at the phone banks, join you at the canvases. And as we discussed in a previous session, it also can be a great fundraising tool as well. Just a brief overview of that would just be, we've seen it just in 2024 alone. We've seen what, Nicole, like sometimes an 800% return on investment from a fundraising texting campaign, and it brings it, it costs $100 to send out, and we raise $800, $1,000, something like that. I know this is not a fundraising, but we're in the texting sphere, and that's another important element of it.
Well, and even when we've sent some field text this cycle, we've seen fundraising numbers go up just because we're reaching, 5,000 people who otherwise hadn't heard of the campaign, and they decide to throw us a few bucks. Sorry, go on, Josiah.
So I was just gonna say, an interesting way that one of our organizers thought, we haven't tried this yet. We are gonna put it in practice pretty soon, but is texting designated areas that we've cut turf for before we go and knock their doors, just to kind of give them a heads up. And it also is gonna like get them ready to have a conversation if they want to. So yeah, it's just another, we like I said, we haven't implemented it yet, but right when he said that, I was like, that is a great idea, and it just, I would love, as someone who knocks on a lot of doors, I would love for them to kind of be a little bit warmed up before I have that conversation. And so yeah, we'll hopefully we'll be back and we'll let you know how it goes. But I feel like it's going to be a lot more successful in getting people ready to have the conversation, because a lot of people, they're gonna close the door in your face and say they're busy. So yeah, I'll let you guys know how that one goes.
Yeah, as a brief funny story to what you just said, we actually worked in a congressional race in Arizona, where a candidate started incorporating sending out text messages with his face, like a day or two before he would go knock on doors, and just saying like, "Hi, I'm Tom. I'm running for Congress. I'm going to be in your neighborhood this weekend. So if you see me, like, that's what I'm there. I'm there to talk to you about the issues you care about." And he started doing that because as he was knocking on doors, he was consistently getting doors slammed in his face, thinking that he was a solar salesman trying to sell solar panels. And he was like, "I'm so tired of this. Every door that appears on my canvassing list, I want a cell phone match, so that I can send that text message out so that people will know, hey, it's that guy who texted me a couple days ago. He's running for Congress." And that just kind of speaks to, when we talk about field, we have a lot of like field terms, but we call them touches. But you want to like have as many touches as possible to your universe, to make sure that not only that they get familiarized with you, but that they can be persuaded and stick with you, which is something that we'll talk about a little bit later in the agenda. We'll talk about GOTV efforts, get out the vote efforts, which are a little different um, than field persuasion. Um, but yeah, that's just a brief aside there. And then one other thing I would be remiss to say, especially in a geography like the high desert, like San Bernardino County, um, would be, we found a lot of success with the texting platform for candidates who are running in difficult geographies, literally where it's just hard to knock doors, whether that's uh you know uh you know whether that's, we've seen it a lot in like Vegas areas where there's gated communities where you can't get your canvassers into, but more specifically towards San Bernardino County, the high desert, you're talking when you're looking at communities like Joshua Tree or and things like that, where houses are miles and miles apart, or and that type of thing, or up in Arrowhead where it's just like not safe to knock. Not it's not really like in the middle of like a snowstorm or whatever it might be. It's just like not safe to do that. Texting can be a great tool to sort of get a message out there, especially because, with phone banking, it just ends up being who answers the phone, and a lot of the times, we're seeing less and less returns on who's actually answering the phone.
Um, yeah, we live in a very difficult region when it comes to being able to knock on a lot of doors. Uh, so yeah, one thing is we target there's like apartment complex areas that they're single unit type housing, and we we try to knock on those targeted areas maybe 2 or 3 times, and then the unincorporated areas that are a lot harder, that are going to take a lot more time, we obviously want to get there at least once, but we'll target either through phone banking efforts or texting efforts.
Yeah. Um, Paul, wanted to turn it over to you for a moment, just to get some perspective on, you know, we always talk about building something and leaving something behind in our campaigns, and you've run, you ran for city council, you ran for assembly, now you're running again. Can you kind of talk to us about how those experiences helped build a helps get the word out about you?
You froze halfway
Oh,
through your question, so I didn't really
oh,
hear it.
oh, sorry. No, I was just saying, with the experience, we always say, when you run, win or lose, you want to leave something behind to build on. And you've obviously, you ran for city council, ran for assembly, and are running again now. Can you kind of talk us through how each of those campaigns have built you an infrastructure of volunteers or support that help get your name out there now?
Yeah, mine was very simple. I took a very simplistic approach and stuff. I am who I am, and I didn't try to sugarcoat it, or I didn't try to be something that I'm not. And the people that I have spoken with, and the people that I've talked to and met, that's what they appreciated about me, was that I was just I don't present myself to be something that I'm not. Um, and I think that has a lot to do with my added success this go round, because those same people, um, the comment that I've gotten is, Paul, we appreciate you being genuine. So I did not try to, and I didn't try to attack. I didn't try to give the perception that I'm the one of the masters of the universe. That I have an answer for everything. I can solve all the world's issues, just through myself. I didn't give that impression. I have legitimate questions like everybody else. What I try to do is I brought it down. My philosophy is politics is local. I'm not going to try to attack. Yes, we have a nationwide problem or problems. As far as trying to attack those problems, or just, you'll go into a conversation that you're putting on a local basis. What we can do to help improve ourselves, our situation, and just be legitimate. I tell people, what you see is what you get. For me, I'm not trying to impress anybody. Um, um, at first, because of my southern accent or whatnot, because I lived in Texas for a while. But at first, people, they thought that I was kind of making that appearance. But they found out that I am me, and I think that's the biggest thing that I left, that caused people to want to support me this go around, and people to want to help me this go around, is just be legitimate. When I didn't let people know that, hey, I'm a rocker and a roller, and I'm a shaker and a mover. I let people know that, hey, my help is dependent on you. Right now I don't have the resources. I don't have this, I don't have that. And when people saw that, they were more apt to help me. And they were more driven to help me, because then they saw that they were actually doing something that was a boost to me, and I was appreciative of that. So I think that that's my biggest thing, is that it's just be yourself. We try to put on the shoes. I mean, we see all the shakers and the movers and all the masters of the universe that they have all the answers for everything, and we try to emulate them. And people can see through that. And that's I think that's the biggest lesson that I just be yourself. I mean, some people are going to like you, some people are not going to like you. Some people may not like you or like your position on things, but they understand and they like who you are. So there's a lot of things that go on. And for me, I'm not going to try to put on the persona of somebody else. And that's been my biggest plus, and that's what's garnered me help from both sides. And conversation from all sides. And then when it comes down to addressing issues, I like to keep things on the local issue. I can't solve what's happening, nationwide. We have input, yes, it concerns us, but what's really affecting us is what's happening to us locally, and that's the standpoint that I talk on or speak or engage in as far as conversation.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really
That's
important
about
point.
it. I mean,
Yeah. Oh, I think
yeah.
I might be, my internet might be tough here. I might be lagging behind. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay,
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Okay, great. Sorry about that. I think I'm having some connectivity issues, but I think you bring up you bring up a really good point as we sort of transition into, talking about canvassing and door-to-door interactions, which is just bringing a message of authenticity and clarity is going to be kind of ultimately the best way that you can, engage with that audience. You know, we have seen it time and time again where yes, there might be a candidate that gets outspent 8-1, 10-1, but they are just who they are, and they bring a clear message about the scope of their office and what they want to see done, and it's a laser focus, and they're able to beat that candidate that has bought a bunch of TV or paid for 10 mailers and that type of thing. We see it time and time again. There's
Summer League just defeated a bunch of money um, in an amazing campaign, just staying true to her style.
right, right. Yeah, I mean that's a good example there. And it speaks to I guess it just sort of naturally lends into best practices at the doors, whether it's the candidate themselves or volunteers or campaign staffers. And Nicole and Josiah, I know you both have a lot of experience actually sort of you know knocking on that door and just seeing what happens with the conversation that you have with a voter. So just whoever wants to kick it off, but I'm just interested in hearing about sort of your experiences as canvassers or campaign or field directors in terms of best practices for getting your volunteers out there, how to have the most effective conversations, and how to have basically the most effective canvassing shifts, that type of thing.
Well, just
Yeah.
real
Oh,
quick before I sit back and listen to everybody else. For me, it's very simple. At the end of the day, and I tell everybody that's working with me, at the end of the day, we have to look at ourselves in the mirror. So if we're not, if we're passing a message that we think people want to hear, but it's not truly what we believe, at the end of the day, we cannot, the person you can't fool is yourself. So you're either not telling the truth, you're either being deceptive, or you're being honest. And that's, for me, that's the basis of everything. The other person may not like what I have to say, but at least I know that what I've said is an honest, is me honest, being honest. And so at the end of the day, or at the end of the campaign, campaigns are seasonal, but we have to live with ourselves the rest of that. Some of the same people that you see during campaigns are the same people that are going to be watching you after the campaign is over, whether you win or lose and stuff. And if they see that you're not what you represent yourself to be, then that's a bigger problem, to me, publicly and personally. Okay, so I'll listen now.
No, I agree completely, and I'll just start with some basics that I give to all of my canvassers and rules that I try to follow for myself as well. So one of the big things for me when it comes to canvassing is safety and comfort, not just for the people whose doors are knocking, but for the people who are knocking those doors. I'm sure some of us have been in this position before where we're sent out to do some canvassing, in a neighborhood that we're not familiar with, or by ourselves, or without being really properly prepared. And thankfully, usually nothing bad happens. But sometimes bad things can happen, and that can mean getting yelled at or chased off somebody's lawn, or unfortunately, we have in the past seen violence enacted against canvassers for campaigns, volunteers and staff alike. And to mitigate that, there's just a few rules that I follow when I'm managing a canvassing program. The first is don't send anybody out alone. It doesn't matter if they're the candidate or your top volunteer or a staff member or whoever. Never send anybody out alone. I like to do just a partner buddy system and cut my turf in a way where people, can share a street together, and each person can be along one side of the street and they can keep an eye on each other. Just for accountability and also for that safety of not having anybody just out on their own doing that by themselves. The second thing is give everybody something that is identifiable by the people as something from the campaign. So that can mean a sticker or a button to wear on their shirt, a hat, a t-shirt with the actual campaign logo. If you're on a budget, we've done clipboards with the campaign sticker on the back, and you can just reuse those every time. Something that makes the person not look like a solar panel salesman or somebody. Otherwise, you want them to look like an actual canvasser. And the third thing is make sure you're checking in with folks frequently. Just making sure you have tabs on everybody. If you're using an automated canvassing software like minivan or something like that, you will be able to follow along with their progress. But just sending them a text like once every hour or two saying, hey, how's it going? Drink some water, um, stuff like that. Very basic safety stuff. And, just making sure that you're equipping folks as much as you can to mitigate any bad outcomes.
I will double down on that as somebody who ran was the project manager for a bunch of Canvas programs in the Valley here in Los Angeles. Also make a educated judgment about um, going up to a door that seems like it's doesn't want visitors. To be frank, the technically electoral campaign volunteering and door knocking is not considered solicitation. But if someone has a no soliciting sign on their door or it generally means like I'm not really here to to chat. And on multiple occasions I've had canvassers bit by dogs. That's happened enough times in those type of scenarios where you want to make sure that you're just your own personal safety and that type of thing is an important element if you are sending canvassers out there.
Yeah, let me double down on that. The way I put it is, obviously we're out there to gather votes, to gain votes for our candidate. And getting into a constitutional debate with somebody on their front lawn about the fact that no, you can be there because the Supreme Court has ruled that this is speech and it's not solicitation. Yeah, you're technically right, but you're not going to win any votes there. And so it's part of the process. But this gets back to something at the beginning of the whole thing. One of the things with the safety rules, the how do we address people at the doors, the hey, what happens if you get to what am I supposed to do if there's a dog in the front yard? I really think it's worth taking the extra time. And again, we only have so much time, but I think it's worth having an hour or an hour and a half actual role playing seminar, whatever you want to call it, where you get all your volunteers before they go out in one place and you basically go through all the things we just talked about. Hey, this is the expectation. This is what we're talking about today. Here's some ideas of what you should say if they ask you this. Here's the campaign number. Hey, we're sending you out with in the buddy system. Hey, if something goes wrong, here's the number we want you to call. Here's the place where you fill it out if you don't think a door is accessible. We don't expect you to try to fight through unaccessible doors. And you actually have a training session. And it goes back to, as I was saying earlier, there's a camaraderie in that too, where you can do it in such a way where it's just before you go out. Maybe if it's a morning shift, there's donuts and orange juice and stuff like that. And you're just going through. And then just before you send them out, it's, hey, does anyone have any questions? In case they're thinking of something that you haven't thought of. So I really think it's important to build that into whatever you're doing and to say, yeah, we only have so much time with these folks. These folks are going to volunteer for 4 hours, but it's worth putting them through a training of 1 hour to really get them all these things. Because the thing to remember is I know they're volunteers and we love them, but even away from that, the person at the door doesn't know that, nor should they necessarily or think that way. And what you really have to remember is, and this is what you want to tell them, is everyone at that door is an extension of the candidate. They're representing the campaign. So that's why we want to give them the best tools to be successful also. And so I just wanted to say that with everything everyone said, absolutely 100% agree with what Paul was saying and what Nicole and Roger were saying. Where you can make that into reality is to do your training of your volunteers and have a training session.
Yeah, I am a big believer in setting up your volunteers for success. I know some of us have probably worked on campaigns where they don't offer something like that, and they expect you to just go to a door and be able to have an educated conversation on something that you're not really educated on. And then that leads to volunteer burnout. I mean, if that's their first experience, they're not going to come back. Um, so so yeah, always making sure that every volunteering experience is a good one. Being in the high desert, we have a lot of obstacles, like the houses being spread out very far. Also, it gets very hot in the summer. So one way we do to kind of mitigate that is we'll have a car that is just like the cooling station, and someone is in that's their job, is just driving, keeping the car on. So whenever the people knocking on doors need a break or water, they can or to just escape from the heat, because it gets really bad at times. And one other thing is, yeah, safety. I always tell all my volunteers, if you ever have any type of gut feeling, just walk away, smile and walk away. Because yeah, your safety is always more important. There's no emergency in politics. I know we all are getting texts like we have to save democracy. But it's really not worth your life to have an argument with someone about politics at their front door. Just smile and walk away. That's what I tell them.
Yeah, and then sort of transitioning into a more messaging aspect with volunteers or staffers is something to keep in mind um is just when you're doing that training with your canvassers is to make sure that they know, hey, here's how we're messaging our campaign. Here's the script. Here's the talking points. Here's the related material. Having that all in the packet for them to refer to. And then just making it clear to those volunteers that, hey, we know that you're not here every day. We know that you may not have a lock on every single issue. So it's not your responsibility to speak speak on behalf or for the campaign on every single issue. It's totally okay, and it's actually encouraged by field directors and campaign managers, especially for volunteers, to set to if a a voter says, okay, well, where do they stand on X, where do they stand on Y, where do they stand on Z, and you don't know, or you're sort of unclear, you just say, you can just be the best practice is honesty, and just saying, I'm a volunteer. That's a good question. I would encourage you to follow up with, you know, the field director who can be reached here, or follow up at this, here's the campaign literature. Maybe it's on there, or there's going to be a contact email on that literature. Please, engage with the campaign staff there, and get your question answered. The worst thing that can happen is if a volunteer just kind of deciding policy for the campaign
Oh,
in a moment
definitely.
of panic.
Oh, I always tell them, just be honest. If it's something that you don't have the answer to, say, hey, I'm being 100% honest. I don't have the answer to that. And I give them my business cards, so they can hand them out and be like, but if you're interested in knowing, here's the guy to call, and he'll just take a quick conversation, and he'll answer your questions for you.
Right. Exactly. So we are getting into the last 10 minutes here. So I did want to sort of transition the conversation into talking a little bit about just quickly, we couldn't really talk about field if we didn't talk about um, the switch. There's a time in the campaign calendar in which we transition from persuasion and trying to you know uh get as much of the electorate on our side, to where we transition to what shorthand is GOTV, what's known as get out the vote. that is generally a calendar time close to when either in California when ballots drop, or in other states election day, um, where the campaign, particularly in the field, makes a concentrated effort to put more emphasis on driving out people to the polls that already know support us, rather than spending the bulk of our time finding new persuasion. And that is a very sort of simple way of describing your GOTV programs. But just wanted to open it up to Pete, Nicole, and Josiah to talk about that transition and effective get out the vote programs.
Oh, yeah. There are places that bring me in just to do it, so I have a little bit of a background in it. I would say in today's world, if we're talking, when you're talking the pure GOTV, when you switch to and there's a lot of discipline involved with this, because it's hard to say, okay, we're going to stop persuading people, and but there's a point where you have to pretty much put your ones and twos into a bucket and say, our effort now is to make sure they go vote. And we usually start that no earlier than 14 days. That's actually kind of a long GOTV period. But I would say the midweek before the election. So the Wednesday before the next Tuesday, you want to start a regimented plan where you're touching each of your identified voters on a separate program from your field program, to remind them voting's coming up, to actually take them off the list if they have voted. Obviously, when we talk about the efficiency, if someone's voted, that's great. So now we don't have to talk to them anymore, and we can get to other people. And the process now is, we used to do it almost all with phones, but I really, what we talked about earlier, we have found GOTV texting works really well. So I would start a process where the Wednesday or Thursday, everyone gets a text of some sort saying, if you haven't gotten your ballot in yet, depending on where you live, here's the info on how to get your ballot in. Hey, we could use you this weekend. We're going to be knocking on doors. And then that weekend, you try to do 2 passes through your ones and twos, through your identified voters and your leaners, to make sure you can get them to the polls. It's kind of the last push to get them there. I like to have Monday be a text or a call that hits in the evening that reminds people tomorrow's the day. And then in the places where you can do it on election day, you've got your team out there just with their lists of voters. And as they vote, you're crossing them off. And that's where phone banking still is worth putting into effect if you have people that are willing to do it, where you're basically just calling through your ones and twos until they tell you they voted. And that'll, and you do it on a regimented, basis. 10, 12, 2 in the afternoon. And then as people say, oh, I've already voted, I have a voting plan. And that's the other thing during GOTV. One of the things you can be giving is this idea of, hey, have you made your plan to vote? And that sounds like, wow, that seems pretty deep and pretty extensive to vote. But it actually makes sense. Have you made your plan to vote? Were you going to go in early to vote? Hey, Tuesday's election day. Have you made your plan? Like, if you have a job, are you doing it on lunch? Are you waiting until afterwards? Have you taken into account if something happens? So that's the phraseology we use, is, have you made your plan to vote yet? And again, you're talking to ones and twos here. You're talking to supporters. So it's an easy conversation, and one that a lot of people actually appreciate. And they'll be like, I'm glad you called. I haven't thought about that. You're right. I'm going to go in early and make sure I get my vote in, because whatever, we got a concert that night or whatever. We have a candidate. We're working with a candidate right now who literally has a city council meeting the night of his election coming up. So it just shows you, it cuts through all these. The answers will be different, but it is important to think about what's your plan to vote. And that's what you're doing during GOTV.
Yeah, I mean, Pete brings up a good point. You know, for those of us that are in the electoral sphere, whether it's as volunteers, as workers, as engaged members of the community, as candidates ourselves, um, we tend to think that, you know, the approach of election day is sort of ubiquitous, and that everybody understands that it's happening, and it's a and of course, you know, folks don't need reminders, but you know, we we exist in the real world, and life is life, and everybody's schedule is busy, and there's been plenty of times and plenty of races where you know, margins are decided just simply because, you know, one campaign just didn't do an effective enough job to, you know, remind the people that they, you know, called and knocked their doors and said, hey, you know, um, uh, uh, we need you to come out next Tuesday. It's the election, and they go, oh my God, yeah, wow, I totally would have missed that. Or, you know, an even better example is I can't tell you the amount of times I've been in a campaign office um, a couple days after the election, or even a week after the election. We're getting phone calls to the office that says, hey, I went down to the polling place and they're closed, and it's like, well, yeah, well, it's because the election was last week. And and that type of thing. And I mean, that just speaks to, you know, how important that transition is, to making sure that everybody has the information, the information that they need to make a solid voting plan, because, you know, you spend months and months building the support, getting people on your side, and you know, it's all for naught if they don't actually end up getting to the polls when they need to, or you know, and it's particularly in California, where we're mailing in our ballots, it could become like, hey, I'm just reminding you, you know, hey, while we're on the phone right now, would you mind just finding where your ballot is in that big stack of the mail and filling it out right now, and you know, dropping it at a ballot box this afternoon. um that becomes a big and important aspect to the campaign. I know we're about 4 minutes away from the top of the hour, so I'll just go before we kick it back to our hosts. I just want to kick it around the room to Nicole, Paul, Josiah, and Pete, just for any final comments, if you have any, before we hand it back to our hosts.
I I just wanted to be real. I'll take the time. Another great session, but I want to thank our hosts for involving us in this. It was absolutely joyful talking to people that are trying to get campaigns going and caring enough about knowing that there's people out there. We do know it intuitively, but to actually have been talking to people over the last few months of who care enough about their community that they're taking that next step. So I just wanted to thank you for allowing us to be part of it, and I'll go from there.
I'm just gonna build off that and say, yeah, thank you. This was an experience. Yeah, I love to be around people who are invested in their community. To me, it's the real magic in my life. So thank you for having us.
Well, thank you, everybody. On behalf of Alpha Kappa Alpha and the High Desert Pearls, as well as Reimagining Our Communities and the Family Assistance Center, we really want to thank you all. And Campaign in a Box, you all are phenomenal as always. Paul and Josiah, again, thank you for your remarks and comments. We do have one more session that's going to be coming up in about 30 days. So definitely appreciate everybody that participated. If you've got any questions, of course, you can drop them in the chat. But otherwise, we will see you all next time. Thank you so much. And you all have a great Sunday afternoon or evening. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Take care.
Mm-hmm.